Okay, attribution time. Mike to the Rizzo, thank you so much for being on the call today. For those who don't know, Mike Rizzo of marketingops.com. I feel just blessed that you're able to hop on, talk about marketing attribution. You had a great post around RevOps, and I'll quote it. RevOps is marketing ops plus CS ops plus sales ops, and what that movement looks like. What break that down a little bit more for me? Like what made you post that? What's going on there?
Yeah, no, like thanks for inviting me. Happy to be on. Yeah, breaking down that post a little bit. I think like there's a couple things that come up in the context of what it means to be a marketing operations professional and this category of RevOps that we're sort of seeing everywhere. And the reason, sort of the impetus for that post is that I think the narrative that we all have to keep pushing forward on is at a minimum twofold. One is that if you are building a RevOps team, uh, you are probably best suited to hire somebody from a marketing ops background
Yeah.
to move into a RevOps role than perhaps some of these other roles. And that is that post. If I were remembering the one that you're talking about correctly, it shows, or at least a version of that post
Yeah.
shows that marketing ops is responsible for looking at the metrics across the entirety of the funnel, right? So
Great.
from I'm trying to build awareness all the way to
Growth.
who is renewing and upselling and cross-selling if you're in the sort of SaaS market or whatever.
Yep.
That marketing ops person is often trying to understand the entirety of that lifecycle journey, whereas the sales ops and the CS ops functions, they do roll into this RevOps umbrella. They all need to be aligned on
Right.
what is this customer journey we're trying to present, and
Yep.
how do we create demand and revenue from our customers. But those CS ops and sales ops roles, they're not really thinking about the pre and post sort of journey as much. Their
Right.
roles are incredibly important, and they're not easy. They're actually just as complex in many ways as being a marketing ops professional, because there's lots of moving parts in both of those functions that they have to try to get their arms around. But this group, marketing ops, is trying to look across the entire funnel all the time. And so that the impetus of that post at a bare minimum is to say, hey, RevOps, it is about alignment across the entirety of your funnel. These three functional areas are really, really important to have, aligned to drive that
Yep.
revenue. Um, and then if you want to hire for that future RevOps person, you should probably think a lot about who's coming out of a marketing ops background and who's been in this space, because they could go pick up some of the other functional areas, especially some of the nuance that goes into those areas, perhaps a little bit faster. It is quite hard to go pick up all the rest of the marketing stuff.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
so
Every
really
group
about
has
that.
its own measurement, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think maybe this is why it stood out to me so much is that within marketing attribution, you start with that full funnel. Like it starts with how do we know what campaign pulled in XYZ dollars and how is it performing and this and that. But then it gets to marketing always knows that they're not the one closing a deal. So they have to incorporate sales, that they incorporate, solutions consultants. They have to incorporate all these other things. And so that's what I liked about it, is like, yeah, those that sit in MOPS are always, as they mature, will lead to a point of having to understand these other groups to some extent, right? They're not going to understand everything that they're doing, but they have
Yeah.
to understand what are these meaningful engagements, what's causing this continuation of moving through the funnel or closing of deals or the renewing of deals. Like marketing's always has to kind of have a pulse on that and be able to measure that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And a marketing ops person is often tasked with trying to understand that, like, you know, on the context of marketing attribution, right? Or let's just call it attribution in general and remove the word marketing. Where all we're really trying to understand is like where are customers coming from, and what creates the best customer, right?
Yep.
Like which customers are having the most success. And I don't mean the best customer because they spent the most money, but like you could define that in a whole bunch of different ways, right? Like,
Absolutely.
oh, they're inviting the most people, they're using the most of the product, they're giving us the most feedback and helping us improve the product. Whatever your take on the best type of customer, like those are very different questions to ask, right? Like
Yeah.
which campaign generated the leads is fine, but
Yeah.
that begat the problem of MQLs are trash and the sales team doesn't think that you're doing a very good job passing them quality records,
Yeah.
and then therefore the rest of the pipeline suffers. But then there's a totally different question, which is like, well, which of our campaigns or which of our ICP ended up renewing the
Yeah.
soonest, the fastest, for the biggest dollar value, right? Like there's different questions that need to be answered there. And if you don't have all of those teams in alignment on sort of what that audience makeup is and how you're defining success for your customers and your business, then RevOps is well, you just don't have RevOps.
You don't have a, yeah,
uh,
we a lot of companies will use the word RevOps. There's something that's happened there even in RevOps where um, over the last 4 years, I've seen people who started with RevOps titles and where they've gone, and people who started with like marketing ops and how they've gone into RevOps. And those initial RevOps roles were people with not everyone. This is not meant to be a broad statement, but what I was seeing is sales backgrounds or financial backgrounds, and it's
I
your
think
like
it's
that's
okay.
what I,
You can make a bit of a broad statement because that
yeah,
is the case. Like we
that
are
was the
seeing
case.
across the
Yeah,
board. We've
yeah,
seen it's a ton of like sales ops 2.0
yeah,
is
exactly. And
really what it
and
looks like.
what to your point though is what you're getting at is like that's where it's missed because they don't know how to
Yeah,
measure things outside the scope of sales. And
right.
again that's important to measure that, but that's where MOPS comes in and marketing people come in and they're like, we've been measuring this stuff the whole time because we've been having
Yeah,
to bid for what's helping you accelerate deals, what's helping you move things, what piece of content is driving this and making sure like at this stage it does this, right? There's a little bit more of a chess match there as opposed to where sales is a little bit more of the aggressor, right? They're going to go in, they're going to make sure they get the right things in front of them, and it's a different play. But I love the post because yeah, that marketing background, the people with that mindset come in with a little bit of an edge of how to measure across those different ones.
yeah,
What?
yeah. It is, and it's an alignment game or not
Yeah,
even a game. It's all about alignment, and really, that's what RevOps is meant to be.
yeah,
The last point on that post that I would say, like the second piece of the twofold message is none of those functional areas will cease to exist, right?
right.
Like people are like,
Hmm.
hey, is marketing ops going to get folded into rev ops and is it going to go away? Like, absolutely not.
Yeah,
Is CS ops or sales ops going to get folded into it and go away? Absolutely not. Like, there's
yeah,
way too much complexity and nuance and uniqueness about each of those individual departments, processes, contract renewals, and systems that have to be there, the signals that you have to look for. Those specialties, you always, always, always will need somebody to understand how does your customer want to buy and how do your tools work and then how do your teams interact with your customers and the tools. So the people, the process, and the technology, and always in that order, you will have to have those specialties, period, and
yeah,
roll them under a RevOps umbrella and call that RevOps because they're doing is driving alignment in favor
yeah.
of your customer's ability to be successful, right?
Right.
So that was the other reason, is that like,
That's a good.
none of them
It's
are
a good.
going away.
Yeah, it's a good thing to call out though because people will post, oh, such and such large organization just moved this person, and people are rolling up, and this department's now rolling up underneath the CRO, or they're rolling up to the CSO or the CMO. And it's like companies will do that. That doesn't mean that those departments are now part of marketing or part of sales or a part of revenue. They're always going to be a part of technically revenue, right? Because to your point, like every department's goal is to sell more, right? It's to make sure that this brand has value to whoever. So I think that too many people take those moves as if like that's where it should live, and in the reality is it's like no, that could just that's just the strategy for the time. It doesn't mean that's going to be the next big move, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And it's like it's not a collapse of responsibilities and we're not changing the
Yeah,
titles. Like sales ops isn't RevOps, or RevOps isn't sales ops 2.0. Sales ops is actually a department and a thing and a functional area that cannot be ignored.
Yeah.
And the same is true for marketing ops. Like, yes, you can grow into a RevOps professional, but it's for all the reasons that I was mentioning before. It's because you've been looking at the entirety of the funnel and you're thinking a little bit about, well, how do our people, processes, and technology all intermix for us to get a better pulse on our business?
Yeah.
I always argue that you're better suited for it from that area. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I agree.
it's you can't let it go, right? So
Yeah. I agree with that. So, I mean, and again, the reason why that stood out to me is it's something that I'm commonly seeing as I've done this podcast. I'm meeting with new people, and is that there's measurement across all of those is really important. And then I go to market movement of everyone's kind of has to be on the same page, and whoever's leading that is there. So it was just a really solid post. So now you got marketingops.com. This is what you've been heading up for several years now, but obviously my specialty is going to be around marketing attribution. I'm curious, what are you seeing in this and within marketing attribution as you lead other marketing ops professionals as questions arise? What are you seeing in this space?
Sorry, repeat the question.
No
I was
worries.
processing something in my head, and then I went on 3 different talk tracks all at the same time in my brain.
All good. Let's do all 3. No, so you're within marketing ops, and as you're leading, this cohort of people and really kind of leading a movement of marketing ops and a community of that, what are you seeing within marketing attribution? What's the commonality? There was maybe some common questions that people are asking. What's going on there?
Oh gosh, yeah. I think one of the biggest sort of revelations, so to speak. I don't know. Maybe it's that the the teams behind all of this and all this attribution and analytics stuff, they're maturing, and the technology has come a long way.
Yeah.
And the organizations are now starting to catch on that there is no silver bullet.
Yeah. Right.
Like they're like it doesn't matter what model you choose. That is just your model, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to do first touch or last touch, or you want to do W shaped or whatever version of attribution you want to do, the important thing is that you stick with it, and
Mm-hmm.
that's all that matters. There's it is impossible to sit there and find the perfect attribution mix that's going to tell the story exactly as it went.
Yep.
We have at marketingops.com, we actually have a self-reported attribution system in place, right? So
Sure.
we allow folks to say, hey, I heard about you from wherever, and it's just a free text field. So we very much subscribe to that mantra of like, let people tell you.
Yeah.
I think Chris Walker's doing a nice job pushing that message into the market, or he has been for a while. We built it out, and then we built out some automation to standardize what those input values were, right? So if they say something like a friend, then we say referral, right?
Yeah.
If it said something else, then we might attribute it to the podcast, for example. They might just write the word opscast, which is our show.
Yeah.
And so, but what's shocking about that is that, or like what is, I guess, super interesting about the way that we're interpreting this data and standardizing it now, is that when you look at what our marketing automation tools are telling us about their footprint and how they found us, it is wildly different than how they said that they actually came to learn about us, right?
Yeah.
So it would have said, direct website traffic originally is probably the most common one, because they go straight to marketingops.com and
Yeah.
they
Exactly.
sign up to be a member or whatever. And then like in the self-reported thing, they're like, oh yeah, no, I heard about you from a friend. right? And so it's like, well, that wasn't organic direct traffic, that was word of mouth.
Yeah.
And that completely changes things, right? Like if we
Yeah.
weren't measuring that at all, we would be like, cool, I guess like our SEO is working.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like somehow
No,
like, oh, it
that's
said
such
we're
a good
Google
call out, because
organic.
what we see within like the B2B enterprise space, rather than this B2C transaction, is there's a ton of direct traffic within their attribution. And there's such a heavy weight there. And when you're already a well-known enterprise organization, yeah, they may already know about you, but how do they get there to actually make a purchase, right? Like, how do they actually get to that point? And it was probably because they were talking to their other friend who's using your product at another company and this and that. And there's a place to have that. Like, there's a place to be able to track and have all those engagements. And then there's a place to be able to like go and ask the question. And that seems, it's probably a little odd for an enterprise organization to go in and say, hey, how'd you hear about us, type of deal. But sales is doing that, right? Because sales gets on the
Oh yeah.
call and then they figure that out and they learn that. And if they were to insert that information, it'd be great for marketing to know that, right?
Yeah.
And so there is a
It used to
balance
be.
in having those.
Yeah. It used to be that that marketing, like when it was, I have so much to say about the quote unquote 4-letter word that is credit.
Yeah, yeah,
It is not a bad word, folks. I will come back to that point in just a moment. But it used to be that marketing, like sales would come back and they'd be like, hey, like, you said you generated this MQL from whatever, whatever, but like I just spoke to the
yeah.
thing and, to the thing, geez, to the
A
human.
human being,
Yeah, I just
sorry.
spoke to yeah, whatever. No, I just spoke to the person and they said, oh, actually, I was told, I went to this dinner with a friend who happened to go to one of your events and they told me that I should check you out. And so it actually had nothing to do with the paid ad that they clicked on because they Google searched our name and you were bidding on your own keyword for your own
Yeah,
brand
exactly. You're
name.
spending millions of dollars because yeah,
you know,
exactly.
But that data would come over anecdotally as these one-off little data points to the marketing team, and they'd be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was like, you know, uh, like, but that was just one time. Like,
That's just a one-off.
it's
Yeah,
just a one-off, right? Like, so there would be this like pushback, and then coming back to the point about credit, right? Like, if you're using attribution to try to formulate who is doing the best job or
yeah, yeah,
whatever version of the word credit that is negative in connotation that you can come up
yeah,
with. um, if you're doing that, then you're doing it wrong.
yeah,
And the thing that I like to remind people, and it's maybe it's an oversimplification of the concept, but um, when Ian, when you go see a movie, right? At the end of the movie, what shows up on the screen?
credits.
Credits, right?
It's there.
Lots
The
of them.
four-letter word.
Lots of them, right? Lots and
Yeah,
lots of people went into making that movie, and they all
yeah,
deserve credit for it equally, right? Like for all
yeah,
the parts that they played. Um, the same is true for earning a degree in higher education, right?
yeah,
What do? You go take college credits, and
yeah,
all of those credits helped you earn a degree.
yeah,
And there's a curriculum in place to say that you have to reach a certain level in order to be recognized as an expert in whatever field that you studied.
yeah,
And so credit is not a 4-letter word. It shouldn't be. It is absolutely meant to be more of a, everybody was involved in trying to bring this deal to fruition, and let's stop trying to take ownership for it.
yeah.
And let's start thinking about it in terms of like, making a movie.
Right.
At the end of
Yeah.
this, when the customer signs the contract, if there was a whole panel of credits to roll up on the screen, who do we think we would have to thank and recognize? And I'll bet you the list is a lot longer than you realize. So.
Yeah, it's such a great analogy. And that's where I think, going back to our initial, where we started our conversation, and that idea of rev ops is where all these things kind of sit on there, is if you can have an executive who understands that. And again, I think we're going to get into maturity of that. So to your point, like, there's not a one size fits all. You have to have just really a baseline metric and stick with that baseline metric, no matter what your attribution modeling is. Like, stick to that so you can continue to report against that. But that's my little plug on that piece. But as marketing ops professionals and move to this more executive or VP level, and maybe you sit in revenue, you kind of encompass this fuller picture because you understand the importance of all those things. Because again, things have expedited tremendously, even from what you were sharing, like when you started and how sales is like, no, this is actually how it happened. And where we're at now with technology, we still have a lot of those conversations, but we can get a little bit closer to it. And if those who understand that get to those higher levels, it's going to really help businesses thrive and grow and accelerate in those deals, whether that's new deals or continual, renewals or whatever it may be. But that fuller picture is just where it really helps.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think the sooner that if I could push on another another gas pedal that I like to push on every once in a while, the sooner that the boards, all of the board members that are out there, and all the executive leaders that are out there start to ask the questions about operational proficiency and effectiveness and efficiency of their executives, whether that's a CMO or a CRO or what have you, the sooner you start asking about, do we have these systems in place to be able to create that alignment, not to create the fight for who did better, then hopefully we'll start to see probably a first of its kind in the era that we're in now, focus on running your revenue technology and running your revenue business like a product, right?
Yeah.
Just like you invest in your product team as a SaaS company or any company that's built, you probably invest in your shoes, you do R&D, right? And all those things.
Right.
Just like you invest in R&D, you invest in sort of like efficiency and making sure that we don't have a bunch of tech debt or bloat or wasted material, whatever version of B2B or B2C you're in, you're investing in your product, and you don't expect some of those functional areas to produce revenue. You just don't, right? Like the person who's like writing the code for the new feature, like maybe that one feature unlocks a whole bunch of revenue, sure, but you didn't go back to developer A and say, thank you for helping us drive $1 million of revenue. You just expected them to create quality product that worked really well, and they're proud of that work, right? Well, your executives, when they're tasked with building out a revenue technology stack that runs like a product, you have to give them the flexibility to spend time on the foundational stuff and make sure there's no tech debt, and don't just keep pressing on, well, how do we get more leads or how do we get more reach or what have you.
So good.
You have to build those foundational elements, right? And so that's the other thing. It's like, I don't know. The thing that comes up is the future CMO going to come from marketing operations? And a lot of us say yes, right? And that's not just because I run marketingops.com, a community full of marketing ops people. There's a lot of folks that say yeah, because like, look at what we just got done talking about. Like, they're looking at the entirety of the funnel. They sort of understand a lot of things, right? And so there's a few more little nuggets of knowledge and experience they need to pick up along the way in their tenure, but like, they certainly could become incredibly successful CMOs. But the reason they'll say no to that job is because the executives and the board are saying, hey, where are my leads? Hey, where are my sales? And the CMO is always tasked with that. They have to make sure the brand has reach and make sure that there's pipeline coming in. And that operationally proficient CMO of the future that came from marketing ops is going to suddenly be like, hey, I don't get to focus on the stuff that I know really matters for us to run this thing like a product. And so now I don't really want to be the CMO. I would like to just
Yeah.
go back to whatever other role I have because I actually like building this stuff and running it
Yeah.
this way.
Yeah. And I know
And
it's
so,
driving value where
right.
I'm in these conversations where it's like, I can't get you past these metrics. And that's what's so interesting about marketing operations and marketing attribution is when I talk to organizations that are implementing an attribution tool, it's the VP understands these are the inner workings, right? These are the value moves for us. But then at the end of the day, when we talk about, okay, well, what are your KPIs? What do you need to report to the next level? They're like, well, we need to know our leads. We need to know our pipeline. We need to know our MQLs. We need to know our funnel metrics. And it's like, and you feel for them in that because they
Yeah.
know it and you know it. And you're like, and you got all this awesome data sitting there. And you're like, well, and there's just that moment of like, yeah, we get it. But, and so it is just hard.
Yeah.
Drew Knoll, who's speaking at Mopspalooza. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But he was on one of my Attribution Times podcasts, and he we were talking, I think, outside of the podcast, and it was just such a good point. He's like, if we're able to get to a point where we actually can create an understanding around those within the service center, those that are going to do coding, all these different groups, and understand what are the steps that it took to create a successful play here around proper product placement, proper coding, this and that. And if we can do that, and that was kind of his like view of like maybe this future look on data. So let's just jump into that real quick. What's your idea around the future? What are you thinking the future holds for marketing attribution?
Oh, that's a good one. I think that I think it's sort of like I'm going to lean on a little bit of this idea of running your revenue technology like a product concept. There's a very new, I, I mean, maybe it won't come, maybe it won't come to fruition. I don't know, but I feel as though there's a shift happening where your let's call them revenue architects, I guess, like go to market architects.
Yeah,
There's this like, hey, like B2C's been doing this for a lot longer than we have in B2B, where they're trying to think about like, what are all my inputs that I'm receiving from the market so that I could do a better job on my outputs and then drive more
yeah.
revenue. And so CDPs came about, right? And well, I wouldn't say that's the reason that it happened, but it drove a
It's
need, right?
accelerated the need for it for sure.
Yeah. And then today B2B is learning more and more about data lakes and data warehouses and CDPs and the value of that. And I think the future sort of like revenue architect role that's coming up is what's going to tee up a new environment for attribution, right? So as you centralize your tech stack around sort of this data warehouse, data lake concept, and you have someone who's trying to think about the inputs, the quality of those inputs, like are they standardized values? Where are they coming from? Which one is sort of more important and more timely than some of the other sources?
Yeah.
Uh, then you're talking about somebody that's architecting an environment to advise the business on directionality and and then what happens after that after you've sort of like built this technology, this product, right, is um you start layering in what may be some of the more advanced AI and ML capabilities on that. And what'll be fascinating is when companies start to build their own moat around themselves with their own data, right? So it's like your product, if you're a B2B SaaS company, your product may have features that other companies might not have. And so you're creating a moat in that regard.
Yeah.
But even if you have competitors that are going to come, price or feature or whatever, and they're going to start competing with you really directly in that regard, that's okay because what you may find is that your fingerprint and your unique business is really good at selling to like two verticals.
Right.
or to like 5 verticals, specifically like 3 different departments tend to buy the most often from these particular roles. And so as you've architected this environment with all of this information about your ability to close deals,
Yeah.
and you put ML AI in place there, you've now created a moat for your own business where you know how to enter a market. And even if you're getting compared on, like price and feature parity
Yeah.
from a competitor, you happen to know that you do a much better job selling into this space. So you might start prioritizing those accounts or those departments first. And you
Yeah.
know the talk track and you see the success rates and you start showing off case studies and all of the things. And so creating that environment, I think the future of attribution or just like analytics in general is about this potential for this like architect to come in and start trying to put in all of the inputs so that you can
Yeah.
get to that stage where it's like, I don't care that company B is competing with us directly, feature for feature and price for price, because they're actually not selling to the same audience in the same way that we are. And we
Yeah.
know that because here's
Yeah.
our data. Like we know that internally because
We
our
know
data
what,
is
yeah,
saying,
we
hey,
know we
we
can
know
close
where we
deals
have
here.
success,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And we are hypothesizing that they maybe can't do such a good job in this just because you look at like Workato, right? Like
Mhm.
their founders come from sort of an IT background, not sort of, they came from an IT background.
Yeah.
And so a lot of their like footprint is entering through IT, right?
Mhm.
Like they're selling into that market because they have those relationships and they know how they think and how they talk and what they care about and all that stuff. Whereas you go look at a Trey or some of those other companies that are sort of competing on the same, footprint, even a Zapier, right?
Yeah.
They're not trying to talk to that market because they realize they don't sell as well into that market or they don't have the relationships or whatever. So
Yep.
I think that happens. We all know that happens already in business. We have
Totally.
relationships or markets, but I think we actually are coming to a place in the future where data will advise us on exactly what our unique fingerprint is and our ability to sell our product.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. I mean, that's the idea around the blue ocean strategy, things of that sort, where it's like you could have a product that is may seem similar to everything else, but you can clear up that ocean a bit by just knowing this is the actual market here. We're gonna get rid of some of this other murkiness here because we know we can go after that, right? And
Yeah.
using that data and getting to a point with this where we're at with data and how we can collect data and with MLs and AI, we'll be able to trace that back and say, okay, this is our win rate here, and you continue to accelerate in those. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. It's really cool.
Good plug on the blue ocean strategy, by the way. For the listeners, go read that book or
Yeah,
pump it in your ears. It's a good
yeah,
one.
just listen to it. Yeah, no, it's a great one. It's a lot of fun. All right, so I like to end every session with a pop question. Mike does not know this question, but I did some creeping on LinkedIn. Try to, this Mike's pretty popular now on the interweb, so I can find stuff about him. But tell me about Startup Judge.
Startup Judge.
Yeah, back in
Oh.
college, it looks like
Oh
I
yeah.
love how the quote here, like speed dating with only 60 seconds each, you judged people from like middle school age to university based on like a business idea. Tell me, I thought this was just such a cool concept, neat idea. Tell me a little more about this.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. That's a fun one. I graduated from Cal State Fullerton, and the one of the professors there runs sort of the entrepreneurship. JJ is what he goes by. John Bradley Jackson. He's written some books too, so if you want to go check him out, I think First, Best, or Different is probably one that he's most known for. But he helps run sort of the incubator, entrepreneur, angel type of thing that happens on the campus there. And so I was invited to hear from young people uh, with all kinds, all kinds of business ideas,
Yeah,
and I had to like hear their concept and then give them feedback. They had 60 seconds, and it was like it was a cool experience. It's really, really hard to like give anybody like anything within a 60-second window, but I think it was good practice for them and for me to try to like interpret what somebody's
Yeah.
business idea is inside of like a 60-second window. Was a ton of fun. But yeah, that's what that's all.
That's awesome. That's cool. No, I thought that was neat. It reminds me of like a little mini Shark Tank. So that's really cool.
That's kind of what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Mike, let's give me a plug for Mopsapalooza. Let's give me the elevator pitch here. You more than 60 seconds worth. You got, so.
More than 60 seconds. Yeah, I mean, look, Mopsapalooza is a conference that is born out of, like all things sort of in our community, it came out of conversation or a request from the community directly. It is a conference for marketing ops and revenue operations professionals of all backgrounds. It is not backed by any one technology or company. We are a community of practice at the end of the day. So we created a community-led event, and
Nice.
all of the sessions were curated by our committee. So it is very focused on actionable, tactical, how's the cookie made kind of content as best as we possibly can. We had hosted 3 summer camps, is what we refer to them as. They are 50-person intimate 2.5-day learning experiences to have group discussions with about 50 people in the room. And when we did those, the Marketo champions and some of that group, the acquisition changed things. As Marketo got acquired by Adobe, Marketo Summit changed, Adobe Summit became what it is. So some of the space there was just an open space for us to try to bring some of the foremost experts in marketing and revenue operations together, because they were, especially on the Marketo side, they were feeling like, hey, I don't have as much of a place, a channel to distribute my knowledge and my content. They said, can you host a conference? And I was like, yeah, but it's not going to be just Marketo focused, obviously. And so that's really where this was born out of. It was like we were doing these 50-person events. We did 3 of them. And we said, how do we 10x that? How do we take it up to 500 people potentially and still create as best as we can, that intimate sort of learning experience? And that's what it is. So we're hosting it in Anaheim, California. For those listening, if this is after, it's going to be November 5 through 8 in 2023. But we'll likely do it again, either next year or the year after. But yeah, it's like we have over 80 sessions between virtual and in-person content, and
awesome.
all of that. Yeah, I'm really excited. All that in-person and virtual content will be available on demand for the members of our community. So if you haven't snagged a virtual ticket, you can, and you'll be able to have access to all of the wonderful, wonderful knowledge that these people are sharing.
Thanks, Mike. That's great. Yeah, I'll make sure to put that link when I get this out there. I want to make sure people are aware of it. It's a great conference. So I'll make sure everyone has access to sign up either virtually or head out there. But Mike, thanks so much for being on and being part of Attribution Time.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and thanks for letting me shamelessly plug Mopsapalooza.
Anytime, man. Anytime.